Howdy, boys. Well, it's been a long time since I've been on YouTube to make a video. You probably may not even know who I am. I'm Kendon, also known as Zach Castigoon. And as you can see here, I'm pretty much trapped in a purgatory of boxes, shipping materials, and products to make paints. So you guys have been keeping us real busy. And the main reason I want to make this video today is to talk a little bit about Phase 2. So let's take a look. Alright guys, so with the Villainy Ink Phase 2, we got 7 brand new enamels coming out. These have been tested through our tester program that we ran a while back, just to make sure everything was figured out before we do the official launch. But one thing I want to talk about before we get started on the enamel paints is a couple things that I'm seeing in the community. So we've introduced a lot of cool techniques like the hair application, fur application, using cloth, glue technique, soft pressing, all these really kind of cool techniques that you can use in the Grimdark style, very prevalent in the Grimdark style. But there's something lacking in the painting, and I think that I've kind of figured out what this is. And you might be surprised that I'm saying this, but maybe we're over-relying on Villainy Ink enamels, enamels in general, oil paints, and we're not really paying much attention to base coloring and more traditional types of painting before we get to the enamels. So we're doing very little actual painting with acrylics, and we just do a simple base coat, go straight into heavy effects. So I think I want to address that in this video, and I think if you take my advice, maybe we can get the quality of the Grimdark painting style up a little bit as a community. So I'm going to elaborate on that in a little bit, so stick around if you're interested. Real quick, let's go over the paints. So we have Decrepit Filth, which is a dark brown wash, general use. This is going to be a very, very dark brown wash, almost black. It's going to dry anywhere from satin to matte. We're going to use this for things like crevice washes, general unifying washes, streaking effects, that sort of thing. Up next, we have Caput Mortem. This is going to be a deep reddish brown, super good for things like flesh washes, general use on flesh. This is going to be a good transition between dystopian brown and carrying crimson. Another flesh effect we're going to be introducing in Phase 2 is going to be Umbral Nightshade. This is going to be a dark indigo or dark blue flesh effect. So this will be great for those darker toned, cooler toned flesh palettes. After this, we have 2 colors that are going to be in a brand new type. So with Villainy Ink, we have general washes, effects, and now these 2 new colors are going to be filters, and that's Blighted Bone Ochre, which is probably one of my personal favorite colors, and we also have Vile Tinge Green. Both of these are going to be filter effects, so they're very thin. Typically, we want to apply these with an airbrush to just do slight transitions and filters. This next one will probably be one that you recognize. So Ex Machina is actually the original formula for Sector Rust way back when we first released Villainy Ink Phase 1. So just a general rust effect, pretty medium rust. And then finally, we have a dust effect called All Is Dust. This is just a medium toned gray dust effect. We can use this for adding dust on bases, dust on bottoms of figures' clothing or boots. And we can also use this through the airbrush as a desaturating effect as well. Okay, so now let's get into some painting, see how all these new colors are applied, how to use them, and we'll talk about some of the ways that we can improve our Grimdark painting through the use of base coloring. Alright guys, so if you want to improve your Grimdark painting style, one of the things that we need to start focusing on is increasing our knowledge and understanding of how to use more traditional base coloring techniques way before we ever get to any enamel or Grimdark effect applications. This over-reliance on enamels and oils that I mentioned before tends to mute everything way down, and if we're not diversifying our base colors and creating lots of tonal variation, lots of color variation and depth, then everything tends to look just really flat and muddy. So let me just clarify that making heavy use of enamels or oils is not a bad way to paint. It's just a very basic way to paint. And I've always said that the Grimdark style in its most basic form is probably the easiest way to paint a miniature. Nothing really beats being able to add a single base color or a couple different base colors on a miniature, and then just adding a unifying wash of enamels, removing it, and then being done. It's a good look, but it's very basic, and we're just going to be talking about how to go from there, how to improve from there, because there's definitely going to be some reasons that you might want to do that coming up in the future. All right, so let's consider what I'm about to show you a step up from tabletop standard or like a power gamer standard. So in tabletop standard, we do simple base colors, heavy use of enamel unifying washes, remove, done. In this, we're going to introduce a little bit more work onto the base coloring aspect, and then even add a little bit of oil and enamels into the base coloring. So what I've done here, working from a black primer, is I've applied Bugman's Glow, Screaming Skull, and a pure white to create kind of like a 3-step transition to a brighter color, and we leave some of the black behind so we get a nice varied base color that has a lot of depth. So this has a lot of depth in terms of value, but when it comes to tonal depth, it's still very flat. So what I want to do is I want to add a couple different colors, and what we're going to do is add a vermilion applied as a reverse zenithal that will catch the bottom of the details and kind of intensify the color variation and also push the depth a little more further. All right, so in the next step, we're going to continue our focus on adding color variation to the model. So we're going to load up the airbrush, this time with Drakenhof Nightshade from Citadel, and we're going to start applying this around the top and sides of the miniature. Now, we're going to add this cool tone, so this is going to really push the variation a ton. So we have a lot of warmth here already with the vermilion that we just applied, and now we're going to come in with the cool tone. We're going to work it just around the top of the miniature and along the sides, making sure not to overpower any of the white. Now we're going to start adding our first passes of enamel wash, and for this we're going to use Goon's Grime and Decrepit Filth. So we'll add almost like a filter effect on the top of the miniature with Goon's Grime, and on the bottom we'll use Decrepit Filth. Keep in mind, this is not used for weathering. This is just going to be used to kind of tinge the surfaces a specific color. So we know in Goon's Grime we have this yellowish tone. So once we apply this and then remove it back off, you're going to see this yellowish tinge start to appear. Now my suggestion is that you leave this on here for about 24 hours and let it cure, because the way we're going to remove this is a dry removal. So when we start to remove with a dry removal, that means no mineral spirits. We're mainly wanting to stain the surfaces. We want to remove almost 99% of this back off of the miniature and really key in on the staining power of Goon's Grime and Decrepit Filth. Now, I didn't have time to wait 24 hours, so I just went ahead and blow dried it. So blow drying it's going to kind of change the way that it works, but the best thing to do is, if you have time, just leave it, especially if you really want it to just stain the surfaces of the miniature. All right, now we're going to start introducing some oils to kind of bring back some of that white. So I'm just going to load up a brush with buff oil color, and I'm just going to use very small amounts, no mineral spirits. I'm just going to load just the very end of the brush, work 99% of it back off, and you can just see just how very small amounts of oil are actually depositing onto the miniature. So we're going to work this in multiple layers, just building it slowly. We want it to remain translucent. If we start to cover up all the color variation underneath, you know you're adding too much. So just keep it very, very light. And keep in mind, this is still part of the base coloring process. We haven't moved on to any kind of effects or anything like that. We're modulating the colors now. Maybe we're adding a little bit of modeling that just naturally happens with Goon's Grime and Decrepit Filth, but mostly we're still just focusing on adding the base colors. And then once we get all of this applied, now we are done base coloring. So this is a base colored miniature to a Grimdark standard. And now at this point we can go on and start adding the effects. So I'm going to attempt to show you every single color from phase 2, all 7, on one miniature. So we're going to start with Umbral Nightshade. And what we're going to do is we're just going to apply this. None of these are going to be thin. I'm going to show you everything straight out of the bottle. No adding thinner. That way it's just easy to understand, and you can see exactly what they look like straight out of the bottle. So when we're adding this umbral nightshade on here, we're going to start working from the back of the miniature and start bringing it forward. Now, understand that we're going to be doing the reductive technique to control what it ends up looking like. So as long as what we're applying is close, this is going to be good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect going on. So you can see the brush that I'm using, it's not very, it's not a very good brush or anything like that. But as long as we apply it close to where we want it, we can focus on reducing it back off and controlling exactly how we want it. So as I'm removing the umbral nightshade with the mineral spirits on my brush, you're probably noticing that some of the oil color is also reactivating, lifting up off the model. Some of the red that we applied earlier with the vermilion is starting to show back up. This is all perfect. Like we know this is going to happen. Nothing's locked in with the glue technique or any kind of clear coats or anything like that. We know that mineral spirits is going to start removing things. Things are going to start mixing. But the best thing about painting like this and the reductive technique using oils and enamels is we can completely control all of this. And we did such a good job applying all our various tones and color variations while we were base coloring that this is going to work out perfect. And you'll see that I'm going to do the exact same thing with Coelia Green. So it's the same principle. We roughly apply it and then control exactly what it looks like with the reductive technique. And then after I get all these little vein details on here and control them just the way that I want, I'm going to come back in with a buff again and start to do some rough highlighting around the miniature. Now I'm not going to spend too much time, because the focus is not painting with oils really. So I'm just going to do a little bit of highlighting to just clean things up, and then we'll move on. Alright guys, so now we want to introduce a little bit more color variation. We got a fair amount of detail, highlights, and shadows on here. So I'm going to start filtering now. So I'm going to use Blighted Bone Ochre and Vile Tinge Green. I'm going to do 2 passes of filtering, just real quick, very light. And I'm just going to apply these with an airbrush and just modulate the color, making sure I don't overwhelm the miniature with it. So I've shown Coelia Green, and now I'm going to show Kieran Crimson as well, because we have updated these to be less granulated. Nothing really other than that has changed. They're just less granulated, so they're going to be easier to control, and there should be a little less confusion about why there's so many granulations inside of the paint. Alright, so to wrap everything up, I'm going to show you the last couple of colors really quickly. So we're going to demonstrate just what Ex Machina looks like, and we're going to just put this over these little iron details on the miniature just really quickly. We're not base coloring anything, so this all has just overspray and stuff like that on there. But we're going to do a couple layers of the Ex Machina. So I'll do one layer, and then I'll lock that in with some matte varnish, and then I'll do a second layer, and then I'll also lock that in with matte varnish, because I'm going to do some Decrepit Filth kind of pin washing around these details, and I don't want that to reactivate or anything like that. I just want it to be a pretty smooth application removal process. So that's going to be pretty simple. And then once we get the Ex Machina on there, and then we render the pin wash with Decrepit Filth, I'll end up with All Is Dust, just to demonstrate down around the bottom of this how this works. Now, the best way to apply All Is Dust is to actually slightly thin it a little bit, and then apply it with a brush in one hand and a blow dryer in the other hand. Apply it. This will get you very chalky. Now, if you don't want it to be chalky, just don't thin it very much, and then don't use the hair dryer as you're applying it. It kind of works almost the exact same way as Decay of Death. Alright guys, so there you have it. That is all 7 of the new Villain Ink Phase 2 colors on one tiny little miniature here. We did a pretty good job not to muddy everything up. It's kind of hard to get all 7 on one little thing without going crazy, but looks pretty cool. Actually, forgot to mention Caput Mortem, but I did apply it down around the bottom. That darker red tone there, that's Caput Mortem. But don't worry, tons of tutorials coming as always, Grimdark Compendium will be releasing tons of stuff, and we'll be focusing on showing you how to use all of the Villainy Ink range, and we'll be focusing on Villainy Ink Phase 2 for a while, at least until I announce the next thing, which is going to be pretty unctuous, pretty oily. So be on the lookout for that. And make sure and check out the pre-order for Villainy Ink Phase 2. It's coming out in a couple days. Go ahead and grab it. And hopefully it's not another year or two before you hear me again. But hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you in the next.